The Night King Who Returned with a God. Chapter 8. Kim Jin-soo, party leader and tank of the raiding party, swallowed hard as he looked at the swarming skeleton army. That's a lot of them. Chief, do we distribute potions? Distribute as much as we can. Unlike the private hunter guilds that invested lavishly in gate capture, the association's raiding party had limited resources and budget. They didn't have enough of the short-term buff potions that a hunter guild would have invested in, or the life-saving recovery potions that a hunter guild would have. After all, the Hunters Association was part of the government, and as a national organization, it was difficult to spend more than the set budget. It's a good thing they're a bunch of bones. Still, don't let your guard down. Even a blind sword could cut you. Skeletons are the easiest of the undead to deal with since their strength comes from their muscles, and hunters who have awakened their powers could tip the scales. But as long as they're alive, the basics remain the same. Skeletons don't have a single muscle since they are animated by the power of thought or magic. Their basic power also varies, so beware of the skeleton archer who shoots blind arrows or the occasional skeleton mage. Chief Kim called out to his men. Deputy Sa, Deputy Park, the two tanks, fall back and join Deputy Han and Dealer Han in the reserve. They were the youngest and most talented members of the party. With them in reserve, Jin-soo searched for any possible skeleton mages. Mansick, how many archers and mages do they have? 30 archers and 2 mages right now. The ones with long-range skills will take care of them first, and the ones with shields will stop them from coming in. I trust you assholes. Before he could finish, the skeleton army charged, and as the mass of bones clashed, Kim felt the heaviness of his shield. It's heavier than I thought. I guess the Scarlet Gate is different after all. But it's not something he, a B-rank tanker, can't handle. With his remaining hand, he blocked the skeleton warrior in front of him, and with the other, he crushed its skull with his warhammer. Wham! An arrow flew between the skeleton's ribs, but as his shield was a little too long, it almost hit his knee. What the hell? A skeleton archer can snipe! Chief Kim was momentarily stunned, but then he shouted as he hit a new skeleton. Archers, wizards, hurry up and shoot those bastards! Sorry. In retaliation, the association hunters sniped the skeleton archers one after another. As the skeleton archers fell one after another with their skulls pierced, they smiled in conviction. Go! A magic circle was drawn to the front, and the skeleton mages had used magic. Damn, there's not a single mage on this side, but those skeletons over there have mages. Skeleton mages usually command a high ransom. Chief Kim swallowed the woes of his impoverished organization and shouted, I'm here! His voice was enchanted, and the threat rate instantly rose as the eyes of the skeleton mages turned towards him. The spell that was about to land in the middle of the party was twisted and directed at Chief Kim. Kualung. Boom! Thunder crashed from the magic circle and struck Chief Kim directly, but he held on. Chief? It's okay, it's just a sting. This armor is expensive. At that moment, a shadow fell over him, and he was met with a gaze. A head resting on the waist, a headless knight, and a huge warhorse. All of them were staring at him. Doulahan! The moment his paralyzed body failed to react, the headless knight, along with his giant warhorse, rushed forward and slammed into Chief Kim. Huh! Chief Kim was thrown back with a bang as voices could be heard calling out to him, but they were quickly replaced by screams. Doulahan, the headless knight and boss of this dungeon, had gone on a rampage with his giant sword. Quack! What great sword? What the hell are you doing? Block the opening! A gap opened up behind the devastating cavalry charge and skeletons tumbled through the gap. Skeletons are nothing to be afraid of since a properly organized party of D-rank hunters can handle them. On the contrary, the moment they become most deadly is when they get into a scuffle. Unless you crush their skulls, the skeletons, which can only move with their knuckles, will tangle with your allies. Chief Kim, Han Ha-ri, and the party, who were standing by in reserve, looked anxiously at the collapsing front. What can we do? We have to go save him, Deputy Han. They had to save them, but Han Ha-ri naturally sent her gaze to Leon, who was waiting behind her. If this self-proclaimed Lionheart King who had slain even that archdemon. Your Majesty, please support us. Everyone's gaze naturally turned to Leon. However, even with those gazes, Leon only stared coldly. A king doesn't take the lead in a small fight like this. What? What do you mean? You should find a way to bring honor to me, not make me move my jade body for a bunch of insignificant bones. The Night King did not draw his sword, genuinely disgusted with the group. It's a disgrace to the goddess that my sword should touch such undead rags. It disgusts me to even look at them. What the hell, really? But Hari recognized that this man has no intention of acting as his gaze remains fixed on the headless knight with interest. Deputy Han, what are we going to do? Ah, damn it, reserves move! Hari drew her sword. The allies tangled with the skeletons are in danger, but the most dangerous is Dullahan, rampaging in the middle of the formation. I'll take care of the boss. You guys support Chief Kim and our allies. Using the skeleton as a stepping stone, she leaps into the air and reaches Dullahan in a flash. But Dullahan had eyes on the back of his head, and his greatsword moved behind his back, blocking Hari's blade. You blocked this? The ambush was foiled in an instant. It was a lost cause, but there was always next time. Hari spun around and slashed at Dullahan's chest, but his armor blocked the blow, leaving only a scratch. Alas, I should have bought a more expensive sword. It was the best weapon she could get on a limited budget, but the dungeon boss's armor was heavier and harder than she thought. For now, Hari was satisfied that she had drawn Dullahan's attention to herself, and Dullahan was pulling on the reins of his horse, minding his own business, unlike when he had been cutting through the formation. Come on! The reins are yanked in response to the taunt, and the slight distance between them is enough for Dullahan to launch his most daring cavalry charge yet. With a thud, Dullahan slams into Hari, and it was a charge that would blow away even the B-rank tanker, Kim Jin-soo. The dizzying impact is transmitted to her, bang! But flames erupted at the moment of collision and cushioned the impact of the charge. Hari smirks at Dullahan, who realizes that this is no ordinary flame. I'm sorry, but my skill range is too big. As if she had been waiting for this moment, flames erupted from her sword. The flames generated by her magic quickly grew into a great fire that engulfed Dullahan. Gah! A scream rang out from the burning Dullahan, but without stopping, Hari pierced the flaming Dullahan head. Bang! Huh? Hari was confident that the blow would bring her victory, but it only made a very light sound as if the attack had hit steel. You blocked it with the side of your greatsword in that situation? Ho ho! Someone exclaims, and a fist flies through the flames. Rolling on the ground from the blow, Hari didn't understand how her attack didn't have any effect. Hari! Just then, the hunters rushed to her aid, but their attacks were no match for Dullahan's swordsmanship. Cook! He lightly swings his man-sized greatsword, blocking the blows and using the momentum to strike back. It's a necessary choice to protect his head, which is his fatal weakness. But Dullahan's ability to overwhelm the hunters with such a small penalty is awe-inspiring. Using his pure swordplay, he dominated the hunters. Excellent! It was then that a raspy voice echoed throughout the dungeon, and all eyes turned to the blonde man behind them. But he was called the Headless Knight and despised by Leon as an undead. Leon had always despised them. From bony soldiers, to ghouls, to corpse golems, to death knights, there is no honor or glory in raising the dead and using them as meat shields. Those that have lost the skill of the living, and are driven by strength and magic alone, are no match for a holy knight. I was mistaken. That's not just any undead. Leon had faced countless undead, but none of them were as skilled with a sword as that one. Those moves were impossible for an undead. How could a creature perform such a sophisticated sword play? Excellent, and so he decided to fight. When you see a great knight, how honorable is it to defeat him? His raspy voice drew everyone's attention, even the skeletons. First, let me apologize for my shallow eyes that mistook such a fine knight as yourself for an undead. Dullahan stopped swinging his sword at Hari and listened to his voice. Your swordsmanship is excellent despite being one-handed. Your use of strategy and tactics is also superb, so you must have been a renowned knight in your day. As he was talking to a dungeon boss, and the hunters paused at the absurdity of the situation. Very well, I, Leon Dragonia Lionheart, King of the Lionheart, authorize you to speak your name. Speak your name. Dullahan didn't answer because Dullahans have no vocal cords, and Leon had no means to communicate with him. Understanding that, Leon nodded. I see. You are excused. I regret that I do not know your name, but let us leave that to the tragedies of the battlefield. No, Your Majesty. What if you're talking to the real boss? Hari wanted to say but couldn't get the words out, so Leon continued to speak in his way, much to the amusement of the hunters. Nameless Knight, I grant you the right to challenge this Lionheart King to a duel. A duel? No, not even a duel, but the right to apply for one? To a monster? It was unprecedented in the history of the gate, but he didn't stop there. There is no need to hurt the soldiers of both sides. Let's end this fight with an honorable duel between two knights. Everyone swallowed hard when he said that. Not it worked? For the first time ever, a dungeon boss accepted Hunter's challenge to a duel. No, the hunters hadn't even requested a one-on-one duel in the first place. But that wasn't the end of the story. However, it appears that the king does not have the steed necessary to fight as a knight. Due to circumstances, I am unable to obtain a horse at this time. That is clearly this king's fault, but so what should he do? Knight, for the sake of your honor, why don't you get off your horse and fight me fair and square? The boss isn't an idiot. Why would he get off his horse? Dismount. He was getting off. Hari and the hunter's jaws dropped as the headless rider, charging on his horse and wielding a great sword larger than a man, dismounted of his own accord for a showdown between righteous knights. The hunters were dazed as they watched him approach Leon. This is the story guy. Hey, before we get into today's story, we need to ask for your help. We're all about creating the stories you want to hear. Whether you're into epic fantasy, juicy relationship drama, scandalous tales of cheating wives, or out-of-this-world sci-fi with alien princesses, we want your input. Let us know in the comments what kind of stories you're craving, and we'll make it happen. Your ideas fuel our creativity, so don't hold back. Let's make some amazing stories together. The Night King Who Returned with a God. Chapter 9. As Dullahan dismounted, Leon realized he had been right. Indeed, an honorable knight. Leon summoned a sword from thin air, an iron blade worn but strong. He wore no armor since the armor forged by Heto, the god of iron and smiths, had crumbled after so many years of war. Leon looked at Dullahan, who held a great sword in one hand and clasped his head around his waist, and offered a word of consideration. You can put your head down. Your swordsmanship by nature is two-handed. A true duel is not complete unless you use both hands. Aye, your majesty. Just then, Hari cautiously approached. What is it? That. Dullahan, he won't die unless his head is cut off. So? How the hell are you supposed to defeat Dullahan without cutting off his head? It doesn't matter. It's a knight's honor to fight to the death. No, so he won't die? After thinking about his words, Dullahan left his head to the skeletons and gripped his sword with both hands. First Knight of Ariana, Goddess of Light and Justice, Grand Duke of Dragonia, and King of the Lionheart, I grant the honorable knight the challenge. No sooner had the anachronistic introduction and misplaced proclamation ended that Dullahan, who had closed the distance in an instant despite his creaking armor, slashed down with his great sword. There was a dizzying thud, but Leon was unscathed, as blade after blade pushed against each other in a power struggle. Leon's sword was an ordinary longsword. Dullahan's sword, on the other hand, was a great sword that could have been twice that size, but even with the advantage of the top-heavy stance, Leon doesn't flinch. What power? In terms of power, Leon was overpowering Dullahan. In fact, he's the one with the advantage in this situation. Dullahan puts his hand on the blade of his sword, ready to strike. But in the blink of an eye, Leon sidesteps the blade, and in a flash, he's driving his sword into Dullahan's chest with a quick burst. One strike. There was no mistaking what that declaration meant, as Dullahan took 2 steps back and swung his great sword with all the force he could muster. It was a blast that would shatter any defense, but Leon parried it with his blade at first, then crushed it with his pommel, as the great sword was embedded deep in the ground. Wah! In the next moment, a kick strikes Dullahan in the chest. It's more of a shove than a swift kick, but somehow though, Dullahan's stance collapses, and he falls on his ass. The sword is pointed straight up, and Leon says, 2 strikes. Watching the sequence, the hunters didn't understand what had just happened. Leon's kick looked more like a light shove, and yet Dullahan's stance collapsed. To the casual observer, it would have looked like Dullahan was letting Leon off the hook. What the hell just happened? It's great. Hari? Of all of them, Hari was the one who had understood what happened. She's been training with a sword for a long time, as an aspiring kendo player since she was a child. You'd think that since it's a sport of boxing and swordsmanship, she'd just need to be good with her fists and swords. But in any martial art, there are certain things that are emphasized, like how to shift your center of gravity and how to move your lower body. Whether it's throwing a light jab or parrying a hit, it all starts with the lower body's center of gravity, and what Leon did was to disrupt that center of gravity. At first glance, it looks like he's concentrating on his right foot, which is the one that's doing the kicking, but it's actually his left foot that's on the ground, and he's using his magic to create a pocket in the ground that creates a small vibration in a 2.5-meter radius. A technique that shakes the ground with just the force of the footstep. It's a double-edged sword, as it disrupts your opponent's stance, while also disrupting your own, but Leon did it so effortlessly and broke Dullahan's stance. The kick for the person with a collapsed center of gravity is nothing more than a slight push to the person standing at the edge of the cliff. It was an intricate technique, but he had executed it effortlessly in such a short time. Regain your stance. Dullahan limped back to his feet. Knight Dullahan was a knight who sought honor and glory. He was cursed by the commander mage to lead an army, but now free of his bindings. All he can do is stay in this unknown place and repel invaders. Repeating that task, he commanded an army to repel the invaders again. Some of the invaders were strong, but none were great. Excellent, except for one man, the one who called himself Leon Dragonia Lionheart, and he boldly demanded a duel as a knight. It had been a long time since someone calling himself a knight asked for a duel, but it was most likely a ploy to get out of the predicament he's in. Anyone who had been asked to dismount would have judged him as such, but Dullahan would be furious at such foolishness, telling them not to sully his knightly honor. Look at him. Look at that knight with his upright posture of a veteran of countless battlefields and the eyes of a star, seeking honor and fame. He is the end of honor for knights. The king of knights, the one all knights should look up to and challenge. How can anyone look at him and think of such a trick? That's 3 times. Will you do it again? The third death. A casual observer would have said that the armor would have stopped it anyway, but Dullahan knew that if this man wanted to kill him, he could have done so at any time. This knight, the idol of all knights, had taught him and honored him, therefore Dullahan could not help but be impressed by the knight. This knight, this Lionheart king, treats his demotion to commander with honor. He had great powers as a commander knight since commander armor canceled 80% of all physical damage, black magic, and many other powerful powers he gained as a commander knight, but he didn't want to use any of them. He just wanted to be a knight, straight and true, clashing sword to sword, without any sorcery. Again and again, again and again, he wanted to cross swords with this man, just as he had done with other knights of renown who had once roamed the world with honor but are now forgotten. 10 times. Your swordsmanship is becoming more and more sophisticated. Have you managed to retrieve your memories? Dullahan realized the knight's intentions. He was treating him as a knight, not as a wretched servant of a warlock, and restoring him to his glory days. What more can you do, knight? Dullahan had the skeletons bring him his head, then he dropped to one knee and offered it up. It was the perfect surrender, putting himself at their disposal. Excellent. I am pleased to see your honor restored. Leon placed his hands on Dullahan's head with both hands and spoke in a pious voice. I will pray for you. If there is a God you believe in, may he give your soul rest. If not, may the goddess guide you to the edge of the garden. No matter how long he spent killing or how many times he fought without honor. May we meet at the table of the gods, fine knight. Dullahan was overwhelmed by this knight who treated him as a knight, prayed for him, and blessed him. Let there be light. Leon's hand glowed and Dullahan sensed the warm glow guiding him. In his final moments, Dullahan destroyed all the skeletons and bowed in worship to Leon. Glory be to Leon Dragonia Lionheart. His silent reverence echoed through the dungeon. Dungeon boss commander Knight Dullahan has fallen. Normally that's not the end of the story, because even after defeating the boss, if there were any monsters left, you'd need to take some time to clean them up. He kept his promise. Gee, he really did end it in a duel. In his final moment, Dullahan destroyed the skeleton's army with his own will. Sincerely subdued, he bowed to Leon in worship, accepting his fate. What was that light just now? I thought he said, let there be light. Isn't that divine power? There is no divine power among the awakened. Even the survivors, who have claimed that gods exist, have been unable to provide evidence of their existence. But the power that Leon had just used to cleanse Dullahan once and for all was inexplicable unless it was the holy power of the gods, the natural enemies of the undead and demons of novels and comics. If you have such a skill, why don't you use it? Hari couldn't say it out loud, but she said what anyone would have thought. Then this honorable knight will meet his end as a commander. To remind Dullahan of his knighthood? To accept his own death. A knight is by nature a man of honor and reputation. Honor comes from deeds, and deeds come from the discipline of the will. A noble knight would have done just that. Hari didn't fully understand Leon's words, but there was so much she wanted to talk about, like the uncertain possibilities, the harm that could come from failure, irrational behavior, and illogical arguments that don't calculate risk, but it didn't seem necessary to say it out loud because this man, even with all that he knew, would act as if it was natural. He uses emotion instead of reason and intuition instead of logic. That's something many know, but not many can follow. Now let's go take the spoils. What? If there has been a battle, then there must be spoils, so lead the way. You'll have to figure out what's valuable. That day, as the dungeon closed, the association hunters received unexpected loot. Doulahan's cloak, Doulahan's greatsword, commander's gem. Other items were hastily picked up after the dungeon boss died. Wow, look at this gem. It's got a lot of magic power in it. Even if it's fake, it'll be worth a lot if we sell it. It's a piece of trash. This stuff will only cause trouble. Knight's cloak, Doulahan's greatsword, magic stones, and more. Although there was some commotion during the looting process, the clearing of the Hunan Plains Gate was a success. Not only did they cleanse the plains of miasma pollution and perfectly handled the scarlet-ranked gate, they also witnessed an incredible miracle in the form of the blessed rice. The Firebird Guild and Yongwan gritted their teeth and returned home, but for now, it was time to celebrate with everyone. However, the problem came from an unexpected source. Your Majesty, don't you have to pay taxes? Uh-huh. How can a king tax the king of another country? This is my own spoils, and it is against the law to tax it. Ah, no, you don't have to pay the tax in cash. You can substitute the tax with a magic stone from that loot. Kings don't count coins. How can you argue with a king about what lesser men should do? Then, Your Majesty, what shall we report to the president? There is nothing to report. It is better that we respect each other's honor. You mean you won't pay a penny in taxes? Stop talking about coins. It's demeaning. The staff of the Hunter Association looked at Leon, who was arguing back and forth, and thought in unison, "This bastard, isn't he even worse than the Firebird Guild?" Yes. The Night King Who Returned with a God, Chapter 10, Hunter Association Headquarters in South Korea. There, a single topic dominated the meetings of the assembled executive staff, from the chief level and above. Leon Dragonia Lionheart, what kind of name is that? I mean, he emerged from the Black Gate and he decapitated an archdemon with a single blow. Is this the report you guys want me to believe? Survivors vary in strength, so it's not impossible. There were cases before, weren't there? What else did you find out, God? Wasn't that magic to make the crops grow? He also assisted in the capture of the Hunan Plains Gate? That's good to know. The Black Gate that appeared in the middle of Seoul passed uneventfully through information control, but the problem is that a survivor was found inside the Black Gate. The association approached the survivor very cautiously. Chief Kim Jin-soo, I heard that you've been watching him the last few days. He even helped us attack the Hunan Plains. Oh, Kang Hyuk, president of the Hunter Association, asked Kim Jin-soo. Yes, sir, director. What kind of person is he? Kim Jin-soo thought for a long time, which was unusual for him to answer a question from his superiors. Well, I don't know. His conclusion was as vague as it was troublesome. You're not sure? Not evil, but rather just. Of that, he was sure. But his values are very different from ours. He is basically like medieval lords. That's troubling. I wish he was more modern. Their reactions were understandable because while a significant number of survivors are integrating into society, an equally significant number are not. The lower the level of civilization, the more likely it is that they were the ruling class or due to racial differences. The survivors were unable to integrate into society, causing all sorts of social problems. If they were just a nuisance to society, they would be ignored, but there were many survivors who were just as powerful as the awakened. In short, even if a madman comes out, the problem is that the madman's too powerful. In terms of ideas and etiquette, it's best to be cautious and match him as closely as possible. Yeah, but he can be surprisingly smooth. He seems to understand your culture. That was because Leon was originally an Earthling, but he was currently pretending to be from a completely different planet, so he could act a little unreasonable. For Chief Kim, who doesn't know that, Leon appears understanding, and in terms of abilities, Leon was surprisingly impressive. The part about descending gods, tell me more. Leon's miracle at the Hunan Plains Gate appeared on a personal YouTuber's livestream, but he stopped the livestream for fear of confusion. Yes, Demera, the goddess of fertility and life, possessed a straw puppet, and it appears they actually had a conversation. It was also captured on video. Somehow, the straw man's voice was inaudible, but it was clear that the straw man had moved. You don't think she was just using some sort of telekinesis? A goddess? That's ridiculous. Most of the officers dismissed it with the same words. A goddess was too much of a stretch. But there's evidence. Couldn't it just be some kind of magical effect? The rice grew because God blessed it? That's ridiculous. If there are demons, why not gods? Opinions were divided within the association, but there was one consensus. The rice must be good. With Leon's blessing, the rice grew rapidly. But that's not all. The land contaminated with miasma was instantly purified as the rice grew. The mere fact that the land was cleaned of miasma was shocking enough, but when the test results showed that each and every one of the rice was a rare grade, the room was once again in an uproar. Rice that can heal cancer patients and give long-lasting buffs. This ability is as remarkable as Leon's brute strength. No, maybe even more so. Ordinary potions made by potion masters only lasted for 3 hours, and they cost millions, so even large guilds were wary of using them. However, this rice keeps the buff longer than potions and can stack up to 3 times if they are of different types. If utilized properly, this meant that every hunter at the gate would only need to take 1 or 2 doses to stay buffed. I'll have Leon Dragonia Lionheart weigh in on that. Yes, sir. And about the subsidy for survivors. Maximum. Give him whatever he wants, we need to bring him into our organization. Even as he spoke, Kang-hyuk was unsure of himself. Since the Firebird Guild was present at the scene, this information shouldn't be theirs alone. At the very least, the Firebird Guild knows about Leon's abilities. It's only a matter of time before the 10 guilds find out about Leon the Survivor. Will the association be able to compete with them? Kang-hyuk sighed as he looked at the remaining budget for the year. But Mr. President, there's one thing Survivor Leon asked for. What is it? Whatever he says, I'll listen. It's... Kim Jin-soo hesitated, as if he didn't know what to say, then said it with difficulty. I need to meet with the president. What? Why? Because he'll be living in our country, so it's only natural for a king to greet a king. It's been 4 days since Leon returned to Earth. He's been staying in a 5-star suite in Seoul. Initially, the Hunters Association had offered him a place to stay, but he immediately rejected them. It's not a battlefield, he said, and there's no beauty in the king's bedroom. In short, it's not classy. He demanded a room with the finest bed, servants at his beck and call, and art to admire at all times. Eventually, in the middle of the night, Hari went around to the 5-star hotels and asked for a compromise. They could rent a suite and decorate it with paintings and pottery pieces. Your Majesty, please let me sleep. At 2 in the morning, Hari asked Leon to let her sleep, mimicking the pleas she had seen in historical dramas. Leon backed down from the request since he didn't want to pester the bureaucrat too much. The next morning, Hari was in charge of room service. Your Majesty, Hari is here. Come in. Hari swiped his room card to open the door and pushed a tray of breakfast in front of her. I hope you're feeling better after your journey. Morning. Hari set the food down herself. The meal was a short rib band sung that cost over 100,000 won. The ribs, marinated in spices and grilled with the finest Korean beef, made her drool. Have you had breakfast? Not yet. Eat when you can. Don't go hungry. Yeah. When Leon had finished eating, Hari decided she should get a sandwich from the cafe on the first floor. Have a seat. Leon invited her to take a seat. Your Majesty? He asked her if she had a meal and offered her a seat. Apparently, he was going to share his meal out of consideration for her. Hari searches for chopsticks with a touching gaze. What are you doing? What? I asked, what are you doing with these ribs instead of making them edible? Ugh. Hari bent her head down and tried to separate the bone from the flesh of the spiced ribs. After checking out, Hari drove away with Leon, and as they were moving to their destination, she began to explain things. The Hunters Association has decided to provide you with a grant and resettlement assistance. They will take you to a place where you will be comfortable, though not as comfortable as the royal palace. That is very considerate of them. When do you think the President of the Republic of Korea will be free? Well, there's the matter of our security. And, do you think this king has no honor and would assassinate the president? A king does not kill a king. Oh no, we don't. She didn't think Leon would ever try to kill the president, but she thought they couldn't assure the president's safety by saying, I think so. Leon is a force to be reckoned with, even for an S-class hunter, and it wouldn't be surprising to see the worst disaster in Korean political history if he were to act unexpectedly. I've already told Your Majesty that land in the capital is very expensive, so Your Majesty will be much more cramped than when you lived in the royal palace. Do you think you'll be okay? At first, she thought she'd try to find a decent apartment in Seoul. Rent support for survivors with a high assessment totaled 15 million won for a year. Of course, if you think about it, $1.3 million a month for an apartment would be a palace for a modern man, but Leon was a king. He had his own royal palace, with hundreds of rooms, and just one of which must have been enormous. They would have to give him the Blue House or Gyeongbokgung Palace to match his aesthetic. Of course, this was impossible. As a guest, how can I be extravagant? Hari didn't mention that the Hunter Society had lobbied to have the museum's artwork removed to accommodate Leon's request. Nor did they tell him that the housing allotted to him now was the private vacation home of Oh Kang-hyuk, the president of the Hunter Association. The Hunter Association was trying to accommodate Leon's demanding tastes. Your Majesty, speaking of which, the distribution of the loot. I've ordered that you handle that yourself. But I like the cloak, so leave it alone. Yes. In the end, it was decided that the loot from the Hunan Plains Gate would be exempt from taxes as a special case. Technically, they were saying, we don't have any loot from the Hunan Plains. It was a better deal than the Firebird Guild and the other 10 guilds. But Leon hadn't listened to the association staff. He insisted that if he could speak to the king of the country, the president, he would be more likely to listen to him. And eventually the association agreed to arrange a meeting with the president in secret. Until then, Leon would be granted immunity and tax exemption from all charges. The loot allocated to Leon was Dullahan's greatsword, Dullahan's cloak, and $5 million worth of the $10 million worth of magic stones that had been mined in the haste to close the dungeon. In fact, most of the loot was given to Leon, but since he had actually closed the dungeon on his own, none of the staff had any complaints. Your Majesty, we arrived. They arrived at an office building in Bundang. It's a high-end office building that's close to the Hunters Association and has a helicopter on the rooftop, so it's favored by the hunters. The lobby is just as lavish as the rest of the building, as the elaborate framed prints and contemporary artworks on display create a convincing atmosphere. Those little paintings are the best. Leon's aesthetic didn't make sense of some of the artwork. Ms. Han Ha-ri of the Hunter Association? It was then that a well-dressed man in a business suit spoke to the two as they made their way to the lobby. Who are you? Hari was wary of the man who spoke to them as if he had been waiting for them. It was a secret that they were coming to this office building. Ha ha, what a coincidence. I'm Park Jong-chan, director of Dujong Group, Dujong Future Food. Dujong Group. Dujong Group was one of the top 3 conglomerates in Korea, so why would a director of such a conglomerate be waiting for them under the guise of coincidence? Ah, you must be the famous survivor these days. Nice to meet you, Leon Dragonia Lionheart. He had already figured it all out. Hari's heart sank at the sight of Mr. Park. Leon, on the other hand, stared in disbelief at Park's hand as he shook his. A merchant shook this king's hand? The Night King who returned with a god. Chapter 11. A merchant shook this king's hand? Chapter 11. A merchant shook this king's hand? Dujong Group was one of South Korea's most prominent conglomerates. From instant noodles to missiles, it has dabbled in every industry in South Korea, and while some have failed and others have succeeded, Dujong influence in South Korea and the world is not insignificant. The business that has been most affected by the gate is the food industry. Countless granaries in China's Hubei Plain, Egypt's Nile Delta, and elsewhere have been abandoned due to miasma contamination from dungeon breaks. 30 years ago, there were no reagents to decontaminate miasma contamination, so this contamination caused permanent damage and, of course, food shortages on a global scale. Governments had to find alternative sources of food for the abandoned grain fields and heavily supported domestic companies in this regard. Dujong Future Food is a large company that has come to account for a third of the domestic food industry thanks to the government's full support. Park Jong-chan, the managing director of such a company, is a person who can carry the weight of the world on his shoulders, and he has never been looked down upon by anyone. A merchant shook this king's hand. For a moment he thought he'd misheard. In the modern world, businessmen are the most respected members of society. They control vast amounts of capital, move power, and even change laws. If you're the managing director of a major company like Dujong Group, you can't be messed with by any high-ranking hunter or congressman. What was this look and tone of voice that belittles and demeans such a person and the business itself? Even the association's female staff is staring in disbelief at this shocking statement. Park Jong-chan doesn't let his expression crumble, and he smiles a business smile. Haha, Survivor Leon, you seem to be unfamiliar with modern Earth civilization. In modern times, being an entrepreneur is very different from being a merchant in the old days. How dare you, a lowly merchant, speak ill of royalty? This king has never authorized you to speak. What, is he crazy? Park Jong-chan had met a few survivors on business, but he'd never been looked at with such disdain. I, Your Majesty, In our world, businessmen are a highly respected profession. Leon's voice trailed off in disbelief. Businessmen are essentially crooks who sell their dignity and self-respect for profit. They exploit loopholes in the law and are proud of it. There was no denying it. Dujung Future Foods was immediately criticized for tax evasion, illegal unionization, and excessive profit-seeking, but other businessmen were no different. Even if the world is different, it won't change the nature and fundamentals of business. How can those with lowly tongues and lowly natures stand face to face with noble royalty? I have nothing more to hear. After delivering the last of his insults and disrespect, Leon strode nonchalantly past Park Jong-chan, and Hari followed closely behind as Park Jong-chan was stunned and speechless as he watched. What? This is where your majesty will be staying. Well, it's nice. In the modern world, a 50-square-foot office apartment is more than enough for a single person, but for Leon, it was nothing compared to his royal palace. Still, he wasn't in the mood to argue, given his earthly origins and the fact that he was used to sleeping on the streets. This place is provided to you by the association for a year. You don't have to worry about rent or maintenance. The association will take care of that. Hari explains to Leon, who nods. She adds that there is also room service and a cleaning service that is paid for by the association. That's good. It was fortunate for Hari, who is a member of the Hunter Association, that Leon passed by Jongchan Park, the executive director of Future Foods. Information about survivors is usually classified, and like North Korean defectors, those from remote societies are kept in quarantine for 3 months for training. But in a completely different world, the gap must be enormous. Normally, they would have to be quarantined and trained gradually, but if they wanted to quarantine Leon right away, there would be an uproar. But what is the matter that brings him to your majesty? Where would merchants go? He must be after profit. Profit? What kind of profit would the executive director of Dujong Group want from Leon? Hari slapped her knee. It's the rice, isn't it? That blessed rice from the Hunan Plains. The situation was so urgent that there was no information control, and an internet broadcaster had filmed it. It must be Mr. Park, the farmer. She searched on YouTube and found a video of Mr. Park. Apparently, the association had taken the video down and issued a warning. What, he posted again? Mr. Park, a farmer, was depressed because his latest video had been taken down. The shocking scene was filmed in real time in front of the Hunan Plains, and the land that was obviously contaminated with miasma was cleaned in an instant. Did you see that, brothers? The rice? The rice? The rice? It grew like a bang? What? What? Magic? Was he a mage from the tower? Did he use some kind of rapid growth spell? But even magic can grow plants on miasma-contaminated ground? Maybe it's a new technology we don't know about. Mr. Park, a farmer, knew all too well how amazing it was to see crops grow on contaminated ground. Even after the advent of miasma purification technology in the Magic Tower, it took a year or two of expensive reagents to purify the miasma-contaminated land. Thinking of his neighbor, Mr. Jung, who went bankrupt because he couldn't afford the reagents, Park swallowed hard at the miracle before him. But the crops grown with magic are inedible anyway. It's enchanted, so it's poisonous to normal people. Even the hunters would need a stomach wash after a few bites. But soon an amazing sight was witnessed. The association's employees were threshing rice and cooking it themselves. Hey, what are you doing? When he tried to get closer to see if they were really eating rice, he was chased away by the association staff, but later that evening he found the owner of the field, Mr. Kim. Mr. Kim, did you get what I asked for? Of course. The guys at the Root Association said I shouldn't take it out at all. What kind of law is that? Aren't you the owner of the field? That's right. Because rice grew on the miasma-contaminated land, the association members ate a bowl of rice each. That's right. Mr. Park was curious enough to become a YouTuber, filming all kinds of wildlife in the countryside. The land contaminated with miasma was cleaned up, and the crops grew in no time. How could he pass this on? He wanted to post a video on YouTube, but first he wanted to do a little experiment. Let's cook some rice and feed it to the neighborhood pig first. Good idea. To test the waters, the two cooked up a small batch of rice. The glossy, shiny rice was tempting to eat with torn kimchi, but they decided to test it on animals first just in case. Bam! That's when it happened. The rice was barely done cooking when an old dog came to the door. Isn't this Mr. Chin's old dog? Yes, it is. Why is he here? Dalshin was a 12-year-old dog, As is often the case with old animals, he suffered from arthritis, which led to lack of exercise and obesity. Why is he here when he usually stays at home? Thump, thump. No, Dulcian, why don't you go home? It was then. Dulcian, who was looking at them from the doorway, suddenly stuck his head into the rice. What the hell? Is Dulcian crazy? The two men were furious, but soon became amused by Dulcian's behavior. You bastard, you can't eat that. Why is he eating it all of a sudden? It was a big deal because Dulcian was a dog that Mr. Chen pampered and raised, and he would be sad if he died from eating rice. Spit it out! Spit it out! Mr. Park tried to open Dulcian's mouth to spit out the rice, but Dulcian swallowed the rice as if his life depended on it. Kung kung kung! Dulcian jumped up and down with a thunderous sound. After scurrying around like a grasshopper, Dulcian immediately ran towards Mr. Chen's house. What? What the? It was an old dog with arthritis that had trouble walking, and only last week they saw Mr. Chen crying as he held Dulcian. But what does that mean? It was as if he was getting healthy. Mr. Park and Mr. Kim looked at each other, thinking the same thing as they immediately started making a new meal. Chronic scoliosis? It's like my stuffy chest has been opened up. The miracles that happened there quickly spread throughout the village. Meanwhile, a similar phenomenon was taking place in the Duzhong Future Food Lab, where the Firebird Guild had set out to determine the identity of the rice. What the hell am I looking at? How can such a dense energy be contained in a single grain of rice? The blessed rice that had been sneaked through the Firebird Guild was cross-checked by the appraisers and found to be rare grade 1 by 1. Blessed rice grade, rare description. This rice is blessed with the divine power of goddess Demira, the goddess of life and fertility. It alleviates grade 3 diseases, and if consumed continuously, there is a high chance of being cured. Blessed rice? What the hell is it blessed with? Isn't it magic? From what religion is goddess Demira? If it's a grade 3 disease, what does that mean? Something like early colon cancer. Damn it! Can you prove this? Test it on lab rats. The results of the experiment showed that the healing powers of the blessed rice were real, as the mice that were dying from the constant consumption of the experimental crops were cured. Yi, hurry up! We need to report to the top and tell them to get as many seeds as possible. The report of the lab's findings was sent to the upper management of Duzhong Future Food, and the managing director, Park Jong-chan, was immediately dispatched. It wasn't hard to find Leon, as Dojong had planted eyes and ears in the Hunter Association. A merchant shook this king's hand? But Leon ignored them, and Director Park Jong-chan returned with a grimace. You arrogant savage! Mr. Park's anger erupted like an active volcano, as the researchers who had come to report to him squinted at the plaque he threw at them, but he didn't care about them. Hey, those rice crops, are you sure they're effective? Yes, they are. You haven't even done any clinical trials. If it works on rats, what guarantee do you have that it'll work on humans? Well, the secretary stepped in. We went to the owner of that field to get as much of the seed as possible, but the secretary relayed what Mr. Park and Mr. Kim had experienced. A dog that was dying came back to life, and after eating the rice and their chronic inflammation and rhinitis were cured. After that, the whole village was cured of minor to major illnesses thanks to the rice. We don't have the clinical trial data, but it's as good as proven. That's a good thing. Mr. Park's eyes lit up with greed. If he hadn't trusted the appraisal in the first place, he wouldn't have stepped forward. The rice is a hot commodity that could change the world. If only he wasn't a crazy asshole. The problem was the survivor who held the secret to the rice. The anachronistic barbarian survivor looked down on the director of the world-class Duzhong group as a lowly businessman. Mr. Director, we must have it. It has infinite power. I know. The rice that is said to cure cancer just by eating it would revolutionize not only food, but also the medical world. We'll see. Since he's so demanding, I'll have to ask for a meeting through the association. I made a surprise visit before the association restrained me, but it all went awry. You don't know anything about business in this country, do you? He was determined to punch this barbarian in the nose. So many survivors of a stupid, foolish, barbaric civilization thought they were the best, but when they saw the overwhelming scientific and productive power of modern civilization, they finally admitted that they were behind. I see you're making a big deal out of a little rice. I'll represent Earth and show you the power of science. Park smiled triumphantly. I'm going to overwhelm him with a culture shock.